I'm really excited to introduce Jessica Teachin, who is a highly accomplished and influential neuroperformance partner specializing in evolving individuals and workplaces through the transformative power of neuroscience-based practices. So much. With her extensive expertise in talent management, leadership development, and personal growth, Jessica empowers clients to optimize their performance, reduce stress, and prevent burnout, fostering a culture of peak performance and well-being. Drawing upon her background as a leader, talent management professional, and her deep understanding of neuroscience, Jessica merges her experience with cutting-edge research to create holistic experiences for her clients. As a neuroperformance partner, she harnesses the latest neuroscience-based principles, practices, tools, technology, and training to unlock untapped potential and drive lasting change. Just in getting to know Jessica, I'm super excited for her to get up and present here today. Her passion for people, her passion for neuroscience and well-being is unmatched, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation today. So welcome, Jessica.
All right, let me make sure. Can you guys hear me? Is the mic working? Okay, good. All right, so let me grab this paper. So I want to get into a minute telling you a little bit about myself. That bio and that intro was great. Thank you, Lisa. But not telling you so much about my experience or my background, but a little bit about my story. But before I do that, one of the things that's really important to me is that you guys all leave here with actions, with something that you can do and take with you when you leave today. We know from neuroscience and learning that 50% of what you hear today you're going to forget in the first hour, 70% you're going to forget within the day, and 90% you're going to forget within a week. So we're going to start with the most important thing, which is the things I want you to take away. And this is going to kind of lay out what we're going to talk about this morning as we learn a little bit about how we can expand capacity, how we can expand capacity of the people, of ourselves and the people in our workplaces, using what we now know about neuroscience. So, to cover the action. So in order to expand your capacity, there's 4 things I really want you to take away and be able to do. The first is to balance your body. And when we say that, we really mean our nervous system. How do we balance our nervous system? The second is to experience neurophysiological, which is really just a fancy word for long-term lasting change. Change that's hardwired into your body and changes how you perform, how you exist, how you operate as an individual. The third example, or the third action, is accessing your inner wisdom, accessing your inner knowledge and your inner wisdom and intelligence. And then the final is embodying greater self-awareness. And if you do these 4 things, I'm going to tell you how throughout this morning, you're going to live a better life. You're going to have better experiences, you're going to perform better, and you're going to be able to do more. Now, if you aren't familiar with these concepts, that's okay. We're going to go through them and hopefully give you some insights and actions that you can take with respect to each of them. So a little bit about me. So my story kind of starts, or maybe ends, back in 2021. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was working on my first book when I got a phone call from my IT manager that would change my life forever. That phone call was that our organization had just been hit with a ransomware attack. Yes, it's not something that just happens in movies, it happens to small companies. They were holding all of our systems and technology hostage for $10 million. That meant every computer, every system, everything that we used to operate and run our business was shut down. We were pen and paper. Now, this wouldn't have been so devastating, this wouldn't have impacted my life so significantly if there hadn't been a series of events leading up to this one that caused this one to put me into extreme burnout, that caused this one to push me over the edge. So let me explain a little bit about our nervous system and what happens and what I didn't know as I was living my life, as I was going through these various stressful events. So when we're living our lives and we're just going along throughout our lives, our body is unconsciously reacting to our environment, to our experiences, to the stresses that we encounter. Now, when we encounter a really stressful situation, our body can respond in one of 2 different ways. The first is it can go into fight or flight. So think you're being chased by a lion. I have to either fight that lion off or outrun that lion. That's the upward zip. Alternatively, we can go into freeze mode. Think the lizard who plays dead, who freezes when it's under attack or threat. In our lives, this can look like burnout. This can look like binging social media, or look like overeating or indulging in substance abuse. Any of those are examples of going into that freeze burnout state. Where we want to be is in that middle state, in that balanced yellow bar. And the best way I can describe that state is children just playing. Children just carefree and happy and enjoying their lives in that balanced, calm, coherent state. Now what happens is our body's reacting to these as we go through multiple challenges, over time it builds up. So in my life, after my son was born, I developed multiple autoimmune conditions. Following those, I got pregnant with twins. So I had a twin pregnancy. When my twins were born, my twins had a food protein intolerance, which meant they couldn't tolerate formula. So when I was tired of feeding twin babies all through the day and night and wanted a break, I couldn't get one. I had to rely on myself and donated milk in order to feed my babies. That meant it was a lot harder for me to get back into work. It was a lot harder for me to get back into the office. And this was before the pandemic, so back then you had to be in the office. That's where we worked, right? And so then I finally got back into the office. It was the beginning of 2020. My twins were about 7-8 months old. And then what happened? The pandemic. So now we're all sent home. Now see, I'm the leader in my organization of talent management, HR, IT, legal, customer service, order management, project coordination. So I have a lot of work to do. And I'm taking care of 2 9-month-old babies and a 4-year-old boy, my husband and I both working, both trying to navigate that challenge. Now somehow we survived that. We made it to the fall when we went through a workforce reduction, as many organizations did in 2020. So now I had fewer people with the same amount of work to do, and we thought that was a good time to implement a new LMS, upgrade our business system, change out our phone system, and change our sales coverage model. Really smart, right? We were really thinking things through. So by the time we get to May of 2021, I'm already at capacity. When I get that ransomware attack, I think I'm okay, but I'm not, because you can see what happened. Those stressful events built on each other. And I didn't know how to reset or regulate my nervous system out after each one of those events. And so that stress built on me. It was like I was carrying around boulders. I was trying to perform my everyday life, but I was carrying around all this extra stress, all this extra weight. I didn't know what burnout was. I didn't know how to recognize it or how to identify it. I thought it looked like some big massive explosion where you can't get out of bed and you can't perform or function. I didn't recognize that burnout is really a slow burn. It's that one little spark that starts a forest fire until all of a sudden you're surrounded by a burning forest and you don't know how it ever even started. So what's the official definition or explanation for burnout? So burnout results from chronic workplace stresses that have not been successfully managed. I underline that part because I'm admitting to all of you here today that I didn't know how to manage that chronic workplace stress. I didn't know enough about my nervous system or the neuroscience behind performance to effectively manage all of that stress that I was experiencing. And so ultimately, I ended up feeling exhausted. I ended up having feelings of negativity and cynicism and distance from my job, and I ultimately felt like I became less productive, less accomplished, and disengaged. Now, I'm a leader of talent management. And what I couldn't figure out is how this happened. Because just that year, we'd won our 3rd Gallup Exceptional Workplace Award. We were doing all of the things that all of the experts say to do from a talent management and performance perspective. And we were seeing the results. Our profits were up, our sales were up, we were doing everything we were supposed to do. My employees had even surprised me that year by nominating me as a Manager of the Year, and I was recognized by Gallup as the Manager of the Year finalist in 2020. Just before the ransomware attack, I had conversations with my team about how amazing we were doing, about how awesome the teams were and how great a job we were all doing at performing. So I couldn't figure out how I went from that state to complete burnout, to spending the first 3 months after I transitioned out of my job essentially just sleeping. And that was my first clue that there was something wrong, that there was something more going on. And so I wanted to figure out what it was. What didn't I know? What didn't I know that would have impacted my performance and prevented me from getting into this state? And so that's what put me on a journey to get certified, to learn about neuroscience, to figure out how our bodies and our nervous systems work so that we can optimize our performance and we can perform and expand our capacity to perform better, which is why I'm here today, which is why I'm here to talk to you all. Couple things to know about me. The first is that I'm not a neuroscientist or a researcher. I'm a practitioner. I'm somebody who uses this stuff every day. And that means what I really care about is practical application. What I really care about is how do we use this to impact people's lives? How do we use this to get better results? How do we use this to improve our performance? I didn't get certified on all this stuff. I didn't get trained in all of it to make money or because I wanted to start a business. Now there's a benefit to doing that, but that's not why I did it, right? I did it because of me. I did it because I needed to change how I was living my life. It wasn't working. It wasn't working the way that I was living it. And I needed to live my life in a way that created more exceptional experiences on my journey, not in a way that was always focused on the destination, was always focused on where I was going to get to. And most importantly, I did this because of my children. Because children today are experiencing higher rates of mental health issues, depression, and suicide than ever before. My kids are little. I have twin 4-year-old girls and a 7-year-old boy, and I knew that if I didn't figure out how to change how I was living, if I didn't figure out how to expand my capacity, how to live differently, how in the world was I going to guide, nurture, and grow my children to navigate the challenges they're facing in the world today? And so I knew I had to figure out a new way of being, a new way of existing in the world, a way where I was rewired and optimized for peak performance, because clearly I wasn't. And as I began to research and as I began to learn, that's when I discovered the power of neuroscience. The power of the information that we have with respect to how our bodies operate and how that can impact people and performance in tremendously valuable ways. And I couldn't believe I hadn't learned this before. I went to law school, I got a master's degree, I had studied as a talent management professional, I had taken all the courses that I came across to take, and I hadn't encountered this. I hadn't been trained on this. This wasn't part of any curriculum. And I couldn't believe that we weren't using it, that it wasn't already in workplaces. If this knowledge exists, then why aren't we using it? Why aren't we incorporating it into everything that we do? And so that is what has really led me to focus on how do we do this? How do we integrate this? How do we add this to our practices in workplaces? Now, certainly there are people talking about this. This is not a new concept. There are plenty of people talking about this, but there are far more people that don't know about it than do. And so that's why I'm here to talk to you, to share with you the information that I've obtained, a snippet of what you can do to make a difference in your own life. And while this is incredibly important for leaders at our workplaces, I think it's actually important for everyone. I think it's important for every single employee, for every single person, because everybody is a leader in their own home. Everybody has responsibility in their homes and in their communities to show up in a way that brings greater value. And so I think these principles, these practices that we're going to go through can really be used by anyone. So what this might mean for this session. First of all, you might not believe me. I don't have enough time to get into the research or give you all the data and information, and I'm not a certified neuroscientist. And I'll readily admit that I don't know everything in this space. There is a ton to know. If I were you, I'd be suspicious of anybody who stands on a stage and tells you they know everything. Maybe you won't like how I present the message. Everybody learns differently, and I've been tempted to incorporate different learning styles, which means I'm going to leave all of you wanting more. I'm going to leave all of you wanting more of the part or the way that you learn. And that's okay, because everybody's going to leave here with something. Maybe you'll think this is just another new trend. This is just another way to do what we've already been doing. You don't need this, you're doing great things already. You don't need this additional knowledge. What I would challenge you is that this isn't a replacement for your past practices. All the skills development and things that you've done are still important. This is in addition to. This is added support to your current approaches that's going to help you in your current challenges and the challenges we're going to continue to face in the future. And the last, which is my favorite, maybe you just won't like me. I used to present because I wanted everybody to like me in a really neutral and non-controversial way, but I'm not actually here to make you like me. I'm here because I want you to change your life. I want you to take away an insight that impacts and helps you in your life. And so that's how I crafted this message. And what that means is, I really need you to engage. We don't have a lot of time. If I had a 2-day workshop with you all, I can guarantee a transformative experience, but we've only got an hour. So that means I've got to have you engaged, doing the activities, doing the things that we're asking you to do as we're going throughout. So the first thing I want you to start thinking about is to identify one challenge or issue, one thing that you want to change, overcome, or do differently that you haven't been able to. You can just start thinking about that. There are worksheets on your table. If as you think of it, you want to jot it down. But just start thinking about that. We're going to come back to that. The next thing is I need 2 volunteers. You don't have to come up yet. You've got some time. But I need 2 volunteers, and I'm offering prizes. So they pointed out the 2 bottle of wines up front. Okay, got one. Okay, got 2. Okay, got 2 volunteers. So I got wine, or we can do an Amazon gift card for those that don't bring wine. And I can tell you, neither of these bottles are bottles you can purchase offline or in a grocery store. They're both special bottles that you have to get. So they're unique experiences. Okay, so we got 2 volunteers, and I'll tell you when I need you guys to come up. So what's the challenge? What's happening today that requires us to look at performance through a neuroscience-based lens? What is it that's challenging us today? So one way to learn, one way to understand information is to use analogies. It allows us to connect to that part of our brain, and it allows us to remember that insight more effectively. It allows us to integrate that insight so we can refer back to that knowledge. So one of the ways that I like to think about performance is climbing a mountain. And that everybody has a mountain. Everybody's climbing a mountain in their role and what they do. Some people are climbing Mount Everest. Probably won't ever be me. Some people are climbing the Ozark Mountains. That's where I'm going later today. Everybody has a mountain. And everybody's mount looks different, and everybody's experience looks different, and everybody's journey looks different. Now, if I'm going to go on a journey, if I'm going to go on a mountain, let's say we're going to climb Mount Everest. Let's be ambitious. This is a fun way to do it. Let's say we're going to climb Mount Everest. What do we have to do before we go climb Mount Everest? Train, yeah.
Get the gear.
Get your gear. Say again. Get your guide, yeah. And what state do we want to be in when we climb Mount Everest? Focused. Calm, confident. Resilient. All those things, yes, we want to be at our best, right? We want to be performing in the best state that we can. Because if we don't, what could happen? You could die. Yeah, in worst case, you could die. You could get hurt. You might not get there. And you certainly aren't going to enjoy the experience very much if you're climbing a mountain that you're not prepared to climb. So this is the way I define peak performance. Peak performance is when we've evolved and optimized ourselves to operate at the highest level of our personal capabilities and in a way that produces positive results and creates exceptional experiences in our lives. Now, I define that on purpose, and I emphasize the last part because we want to be operating at our best in a way that makes our experiences worthwhile, in a way that makes our lives more enjoyable, not just so we can get to the destination, not just so we can achieve the outcome. We want to enjoy our journey. So what is preventing us from operating at peak performance? I'm going to have my two volunteers come up now. One of you on each side of the room. So if you think about, you've probably seen the jar of life. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But the concept here is that there are big rocks in our lives. The big rocks represent our work, our family, our well-being, our development, and the challenges that we experience in our lives. The pebbles represent the projects, the events, the vacations, the birthdays, the holidays, the flat tires, the things that just come up, the things that get in the way, the things that we have to do or need to do, and they take up a lot of time and attention, but they are just one more thing. The sand is all the stuff we have to do every day. Feeding, bathing, cleaning, paying bills, just our everyday life. And the water is our stress. It's what's created by everything else. Now I've set up two stations on either side of the room, and you each have a jar, and within the jar is your pebbles. So you can pull out your pebbles. And what we're gonna do in a minute, and my dear partner and friend, Shelly, is going to help us with keeping time, is I'm gonna give you 4 minutes to fit as many of these rocks, pebbles, and sand into the jar without the water spilling. Adding the water without this water spilling. So you've got 4 minutes to fit as many of these into one container as you can without the water spilling. Now, I'm not gonna leave them up here all on their own. So kind of split yourselves down the middle of the room. If you want to come up closer to your side of the room, you can. Hold on. One more minute. And I want you guys can give as much advice and suggestions, and here's how best to do it as you can, because we get that all the time in our lives, right? If you just did these things, so you guys can come up and offer support and suggestions and encouragement. So this is always good. It's good not to stay sitting for too long anyway. So get up if you want to. Come up, give advice, support your fellow HR professionals up here. And Shelly, you gonna go ahead? You got the time?
Yep. Ready? Time starts now.
Now.
First, yeah.
Watch the time. That was it.
Yeah,
The line.
Yeah, that's the
Since there's a cop, I'll do it this way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Grab me after.
Start with just a little at a time.
I gotta go. Yeah, let me grab you after, and I would be happy.
I love that. Oh, girlfriend. I love the toilet.
All right, surprise everybody. So you just had a life challenge in your life because lives aren't straightforward, right? Challenges just come up. So you've got a life challenge you gotta fit in your jar.
Push it into the sand.
Now what do? We have a little bit of attitude.
I have faith.
Remember doing that as a little kid? We wind up doing something. Yes, every
Do you
time.
think it takes 4 minutes for the water to settle in? Do you think she's timed it before that she knew it was 4 minutes?
All right, you guys stuck yet?
What did she say? Are we stuck yet?
Yeah, are you stuck?
Nobel Prize winning.
All right, time's up. Time's up, everybody. And you know what? It was somewhat of a trick. So you both get to choose bottle of wine or get an Amazon gift card. You both win. You guys can go back.
Yeah, it's a
So what did you guys leave out? Did you leave anything out? Water. It can be hard to make decisions. You're welcome. You're welcome. It can be hard to make decisions about what to leave out. Anybody ever feel like this? Can you relate to this in your life where your jar is just too full? You've got too much. You can't figure out how to fit it all in. My sister and I talk about this all the time. There's just too many things we have to do and accomplish in our lives, and so it feels like our lives are overflowing. What if we could fit everything in a cup or container? What would we need in order to fit it all? A bigger cup. So did anybody think about just going to get a bigger container? There were two right up front.
So I saw those containers, but I thought they were for something else that you were gonna do later.
Yeah.
So,
So wouldn't it be nice if we could just get a bigger cup? Wouldn't it be nice if we could just get more capacity to do the things and handle the things and fit all the stress? Yeah.
I also kind of thought that if I didn't use all the water, it meant that there wasn't the complete overload of stress. So I was good with that.
Yeah, except for the problem is that when we thought that stress, we actually can't just leave it out, right? We've got it. It has to fit in. So this is what happened on my journey. This was my experience, and one that's experienced by lots of people. In 2022, Gallup said 76% of employees experience burnout at least some of the time. Can you see what happens here is that we're not equipped. We're not operating at our peak. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the capabilities of what we need to in order to climb our performance mountain. So the experience isn't enjoyable. In some cases, it's downright dangerous. We get sick, our bodies get sick, our health is affected. It impacts everything that we do and how we live and exist. So what's changed in our lives that's impacting our journeys? I have a theory here that because of all the stress we endured throughout the pandemic, because of all the challenges that we had and all of the things that we went through in the most recent years, that people are at capacity. That people who used to be able to handle one more challenge or one more thing, right now, they can't. Right now, that one more thing tips them over the edge. I've talked to some of you, I've talked to dozens of HR professionals in the last 6 months, and so many of them have talked to me about the mental health challenges, the burnout challenges, the performance challenges that people are experiencing because of their current level of stress, because of their current state experience. And one way to think about this is that our mountains, we've got new mountains we're trying to climb. We've got whole new worlds of work with remote work or hybrid work, or where are people working and when and how do you create collaboration if you're doing that? Our terrain has changed. And we've got new challenges blocking our path. We've got this AI function that we're trying to figure out how to use, how it applies, how it fits, how to use it in ethical and appropriate ways. And all of that is compounded by the rivers of stress that are flooding our lives. We have more exposure to challenges and stress in our lives today than ever before. In fact, there are some people that say that we have more access to information today than the US government did 20 to 30 years ago. We are getting notifications all day long of crises, of terrible things that are happening in our neighborhoods, in our worlds, our communities, and all of that is adding stress onto our bodies, whether we recognize it or not. So what's the solution? Well, we could just bury our heads in the sand, but the easiest solution isn't usually the best solution. So instead, how do we expand people's capacity? How do we give them a bigger container? So the way to do this is to add in vertical development to our horizontal development. How many of you are familiar with the difference between horizontal and vertical development? Few people, I see a few heads shaking. So horizontal development is increase in skills, knowledge, experience. It's the doing. It's your competence. It's what we typically think about when we think about learning and development. Vertical development is getting the bigger cup. It's expanding your capacity. It's the being. How do we show up? Who are we? How do we exist in the world? And the challenge is, if our people are at capacity, if their cup is already full, we can keep training them on resilience and how to communicate better and how to have more effective conversations and give each other feedback. We can keep doing all that, but it's got nowhere to go. Their cup is full. The way I like to think about this is, if I take my one of my 4-year-old twins, at the end of the day, after she's played all day, she's hungry, she's cranky, she's tired, and I say, let's sit down and learn math. How well is that gonna work? Yeah, not real good. So if our people are already at capacity, if they're stressed, if they're overwhelmed, then they're not gonna take in that information. They're not gonna be able to develop those skills, increase their productivity, increase their proficiency at those skills. So first we've gotta help them expand their capacity. Now, often when we talk about development, especially as it relates to performance, people start thinking that there's something wrong with them, that there's something broken or that needs to be fixed. We talk about improvement, you gotta improve these skills, and you gotta get better at how you communicate, you gotta get better at how you do these things. But the truth is, they're not broken at all. It's the mirror that we're looking in that's broken. We are wired exactly the way we needed to be to live the life that we've lived. We've done our very best with the resources we have. You see, as we live our life, we have these experiences. We live in environments and cultures, and we develop relationships, and we have all of these different experiences. And all of those experiences start to become wired into our bodies, into our physiology and neurophysiology. They become imprinted on our nervous system, our muscles, our neurons, and our neurons wire together, and then they fire together. And as they do, those pathways strengthen. And those pathways are what are impacting our reactions, our interactions, our relationships, our decision-making, everything we do. And they're all correct. They were what we needed as we were living our lives. And our brains do this to conserve energy. They do this on purpose. Because if I can make a decision more quickly, if I can follow a pathway that already exists, I can get things done, I can handle more, I can do more. But if that pathway is not serving me anymore, if that pathway is actually limiting my ability to do more, then I may have to change it. I may have to rewire it. So instead of thinking about it of how can I fix, what do I need to fix about myself, I want us to think about how do we evolve ourselves. The way I like to think about this is that we're always evolving in response to our experiences in our environment. As we live our lives, no matter whether you do it consciously or unconsciously, your neurons are firing, and they are wiring, and those pathways are either being strengthened or being changed. The challenge is that we must be intentional. We must do it intentionally, evolve ourselves in ways that create more exceptional experiences in our lives. Instead of just relying upon the pathways that we've always lived using, maybe there's a better way. Maybe it's time to create a new neural pathway. maybe if we do it intentionally, we can create better results. So how do we create greater self-awareness with a neuroscience-based approach? How do we evolve ourselves? You see, one of the best ways, and really the only way we change our being, is through self-awareness. That is how we accomplish that vertical development. That is how we expand our capacity. So if you think about this in context of our journey or of our mountain that we're climbing, this is like getting the map with the legend. How do we know the messages that our body's sending us? How do we know how to navigate our journey? How do we use the tools that we have available to us to enjoy the experience and the path that we take more? Now, there's two types of self-awareness. Most of us are familiar with conceptual self-awareness. This is the one I was most familiar with. Conceptual self-awareness is how we think about ourselves. It's our ability to identify our identities. And it's always based on the past or the future. Who have we been and who do we want to be moving forward? And so these are all the different personality assessments and tools out there that help you understand your strengths, your talents, your motivations, your values, your interests, all of those things that help you to understand your concept of yourself. The type of self-awareness I wasn't familiar with is embodied self-awareness. This is the experience that happens within yourself. This is our ability to feel ourselves in space, to access our senses, to understand what information we're taking in, and tapping into the neural networks that exist within our bodies. So this is things like understanding our emotions, our physical responses that occur in the body, our urges, and labeling our sensory experiences. An embodied self-awareness only happens in the present moment. It only happens right now in this moment. Now, a lot of people think they have high self-awareness, and I might have been one of them. But this study that Harvard Business Review did calls that into question. 95% of people believe they have self-awareness. Only 15% actually do. And the statistic is worse if you're a leader. So the level of self-awareness that we have is often not as great as we think it is. And I think it's often because we're only thinking of the conceptual side. We're not thinking about or paying attention to the embodied self-awareness. It's one of my favorite quotes. All knowing is in the doing. So I want you to grab that worksheet if you haven't already. And I'm going to ask you to kind of follow along as we do some of these exercises. Because even if your brain doesn't remember this experience, your body actually might, if you do it, if you participate. So the first thing we have to do when it comes to expanding our capacity and balancing our bodies is to become present. We have to get present. So how do we get present? We spend so much of our lives in the past and the future. We spend so much of our lives thinking about what we just did, how it went right, how it went wrong, how we wish we had done it better, what we have to do next, what's on our to-do list, what do we have to accomplish. One of my favorite ways, or one of my favorite quotes is, if there's a feather on a marble floor in the past or the future, no matter how hard you blow, can you move it? You can't, right? And the same is true for growth and development. You can't accomplish it in the past or the future. It only occurs in the present. So you have to be fully present in order to create that vertical development, in order to expand your capacity. And then we have to access our energy. Oftentimes we say, I just wish I had more time, and talk all of the time about time and how there's never enough. But what we really mean, and we should really say, is how do I get more energy back? How am I able to accomplish more with the same amount of time? And if you think back to the beginning when I told you my story, and as that stress builds up, if we're carrying around all those boulders, we're not optimized to be using our full energy. So we have to figure out how to reset our stress baseline and how to be doing that all the time so that we're never carrying around those boulders, so that we're never carrying around that chronic stress and the effects of that chronic stress. So when it comes to these different nervous system states, so again, think back to the fight or flight or the freeze mode, and there's all the different states in between. Each of them is associated with a different set of emotions. Now what happens is, as we're living our lives and we're experiencing different moments of stress and fight, flight, freeze, as we're experiencing these different nervous system states, when we're out of the center, our nervous system is dysregulated. It's out of coherence. And that can happen even if we don't recognize it. So oftentimes, and especially when I was in that situation, I thought I was fine before the ransomware attack. I thought I was handling everything well. But our bodies can actually register stress even when on the surface we're not able to recognize it. And one of the ways we can identify that is through heart rate variability. And so if you measure your heart rate variability, which is essentially the difference between your heartbeats that change, you can see how regular or irregular your heartbeat is. Now, if your heartbeat is really irregular, like in this chart, you're likely experiencing some of those extreme emotions, those dysregulated nervous system states, and you're out of coherence. That means your body's experiencing stress, even if you're not conscious of it. Now, I monitor my heart rate variability all day long, and there are times where I am shocked that my stress level is as bad as it is, that my heart rate variability is as bad as it is. Because it doesn't show up on the surface, it's happening inside our bodies. Our bodies are responding to our environment, even if we're not conscious of it. And when we're in that state, we don't perform as well. We don't make good decisions, we don't get as much done. Whereas instead, if we get ourselves into a coherent state, into a balanced state, then we're gonna perform more optimally. We're gonna get better results. So we're gonna do this exercise. I'm not gonna make you do it for 2.5 minutes, although ideally you would do it for 2.5 minutes. But we're gonna do this exercise and we're gonna take just 1 minute to do some balanced breathing. The reason that we do this is because our breath is one of the ways, one of the points within our body that impacts both our automatic nervous system, and it's controlled by our somatic. We can choose to do it. Somatic is when I move my arm, I'm using my somatic nervous system. When I'm breathing without thinking about it, I'm using my autonomic. So our breath is one way that connects both of those. It's one of the bridges. And so it's the easiest and simplest and most cost-effective way to bring yourself into coherence. So we're gonna do this for 1 minute, and I'm also gonna talk you through becoming really present. So I'm gonna click this in a second, you're gonna hear some dings. And 6 seconds is ideally what's been shown to be the best breath. If that feels too long for you, you can shorten that. You don't have to follow along to the sounds either. So take a minute and just breathe in and out. And in. And out. You can close your eyes, you can open your eyes, whatever's more comfortable. As you're breathing, I want you to notice where you're breathing. Is your breath in your chest or in your belly? When we breathe into our chest, it's often due to stress. See if you can shift your breath down into your belly. And then I just want you to notice your body. Is there any tension, stress anywhere within your body? Just notice. Notice the temperature, your feet on the floor, and taste in your mouth or any smells that you smell. So you'll probably never experience anything like that again, because most speakers won't give up even 1 minute of their speech to let people breathe. But I encourage you to try that practice. It's a way to get you into coherence. And if you think about all the times you're going from one meeting to the next, you're so frustrated, thinking about what just happened and how it just went and the things you just did and what you have to do later as you enter the next, and we're not coherent, which means that the conversations aren't going to be as effective, which means the decisions aren't going to be as good, and we're certainly not going to produce the results we'd like to be producing. The next way we expand our capacity is by experiencing that long-term lasting change, that neurophysiological change. And so here we have to ask, what is it that's limiting our capacity? What's preventing us from expanding our capacity, from performing better, from living our lives in the way that we want to live them, from creating the actions or the results that we want in our lives? And what is doing that is those neural pathways. It's how all the experiences we've had through our lives that have created those connections and the behaviors and actions that we take in our lives. One of the things that I discovered, or one of the things that used to frustrate me to no end, is I would train managers on certain skills. And they would know what to do, how to do it, why to do it. Sometimes they'd even really actually want to do it, and they still wouldn't do it. Anybody have this experience? Managers who know they need to set expectations but don't, know they need to give feedback but don't, know they need to be having development conversations but never actually have them? So it drove me crazy, right? So what was going on? Well, what happens is we're often focused at the top, at the behaviors and the actions. We see a behavior of not setting expectations or not giving feedback. We see that result and we look for the behavior. They're making excuses for not giving feedback. There's no time, they're too busy, they don't have time to put in place expectations, they don't have time to have those conversations, and we stop there. So we start creating goals and habits and strategies for them to start setting expectations, to start giving feedback. But that's not the issue. See, the issue is a lot deeper. The issue isn't on the surface. So if we dig deeper, we find out what they're thinking. Maybe they're thinking, this person is my friend, and if I give them this feedback, they won't like me anymore. If they quit or find a new job, it'll hurt everyone. And the feeling that goes with that thinking, because our feelings impact our thoughts, and our thoughts impact our feelings, maybe they're nervous it's going to impact their relationship, or they're worried that if they give that feedback, if they're direct in the way that they need to be, it's going to hurt the business or the team. And underneath those feelings is the core emotion of fear. So what triggered that emotion? What is it that caused a person to experience fear in the first place? Their physiology. Something that was rooted in their neural pathways and how they think about and experience the world. And consequently, this is a real example with the CEO of a business who had worked for 30 years and struggled in all those years to give feedback when key leaders weren't performing effectively. We had to get all the way down to the neural pathway, all the way down to the rooted behavior that was leading to those results. So take a minute and on your worksheet, write down the current challenge, the challenge that you've identified, and write down what outcome you'd like to see. What's your desired outcome? This is how we typically do it, right? We look at what's not working, then we look at where we want to be, and then we look at what are the steps, actions, goals, projects, what's my path to get to that outcome? The challenge is, what if we haven't picked the right outcome? What if what we think we want isn't what we really need? What if we think that the action or the result that we want to accomplish isn't the best in the situation? So instead, I want you to try capturing what is it that's blocking you? What is it that's preventing you from getting to that desired state? What is it that's getting in the way? Just jot down a few notes. So let's try a different approach. Let's use our iceberg. If you turn your page over, you'll see, start at the bottom. And I want you to just notice, as you're thinking about the things that are blocking you or getting in the way, what do you experience in your body? as you think about the issue. The example the CEO I gave, his example was he felt like pushing away from the table and leaving the room because he didn't want to give the feedback. So if you think about what's blocking you, what do you experience in your body? Maybe as you're noticing that, an emotion comes to the surface. Emotions are core, they're associated with that physiological response, that increase in energy, sweating, tightness in the chest. It's associated with those things. So maybe you feel happy, maybe you feel sad, anger, fear, disgust, surprise, or shame. What emotion are you experiencing? And then as we start to feel that emotion, we start having feelings or thoughts. So we start to try to interpret those sensations. So what feelings or thoughts do you have as a result of those emotions? And our feelings impact our thoughts, and our thoughts impact our feelings. So there are thoughts that are created by those feelings, and there's feelings created by those thoughts. You can go either way. And as you get to the top, what behaviors are being created by those thoughts and feelings? Or another way to think about it is, what do you do when you think and feel this way? What do you do? What actions do you take? What results do you get? And by now you might be starting to see the connection between the experience that you're having within your physiology, within your body, within those neural connections, and how those are leading to those results, how those are leading to those actions, to the results that you're getting. So the last thing we have to do is to expand your capacity by accessing your inner wisdom to rewire those neural pathways. So if we want to create new neural pathways, we have to figure out how to get to them and rewire them. So this is where it's often really different than traditional horizontal-based learning, in that, first of all, the solution is going to be unique to you. No one else in the world developed your neural pathways the way that you did because of the experiences that you had. You're completely unique in that way. And most of the time when we're talking about learning and development, we're talking about the things that we learn and that we do, we're more focused on the doing than we are on the being. And so in this instance, in order to expand our capacity, we have to be focused on the being, how we're showing up, rather than the things that we're doing, rather than the things that we're accomplishing. So how do we change our neural pathways? Well, there's been a ton of neuroscience research, and Grant Susalu, who invented something called multiple brain integration techniques, did a lot of behavioral modeling research around the fact that we actually have 3 brains. What that means is really that we have neural networks in our head, heart, and guts. There are neurons that have fired and wired together in each of those places, and they all have characteristics of what we might call a brain. Most of the issues that we have in our lives are tied to misalignment or blocks between our intelligences. Each of those intelligences has their own function, and when they aren't working together effectively, when they aren't working together in a way that is optimized, when there's something that's blocked or misaligned, is when we're not getting the results that we want, when we're not able to expand our capacity. So first we have to understand the functions of each of these. So the head's pretty obvious. We live in a super head-brained society. The head is perception, taking in information through my senses, thinking about that information, thinking about everything that I've taken in, and then making meaning of it. How does this fit? How does this apply? How does this work in my life? The heart, I want you to think of somebody you just love, the person you just love most in this world. And put your hand where you feel that love. It's in our heart, right? Our heart is responsible for our emotions, our relational affect, or our felt connection, our felt sense of other people. and our values, what's really important to us. Anybody ever had a bad gut instinct? Yeah, maybe it was somebody, when you were younger that you probably shouldn't have dated, but then you did, or maybe you didn't, right? Did you listen to your gut instinct or not? We all have this gut instinct, and it's tied to a function that our gut has called self-preservation, to keep us safe, to help us stay safe. And along with that self-preservation comes mobilization, taking action. Because if we need to outrun the lion, if we have to outrun the danger, we have to be ready to take action. We have to be ready to mobilize. And then the last function of the gut is our core identity. It's who we are at our core. Once we understand the functions, and maybe even now you can start to see the connection between what's blocking you and one of those functions, but then we have to communicate with those functions. And I wish we had time to do this together, but we don't. So I've included some of these questions if you want to take this a step further. But we have to ask our head, heart, and gut for messages. What does our head really think or understand about what's blocking us or the issue? What does our heart truly feel, want, or value with respect to the issue? What does our gut deeply identify with or need? And as we ask ourselves these questions, we can begin to understand where that block or misalignment might be. Where is the issue? What's going on? What's not working the way we want it to? Then we have to align and integrate our head, heart, and gut, our three intelligences, in their highest expression. So what that means is that when our head is operating at its best, it's in a creative state. When our heart is operating at its best, it's in a compassionate state. And when our gut is operating at its best, it's in a courageous state. And so we have to bring our head, heart, and gut into that highest expression by creating alignment and integrating them together. Again, I wish that I could take you all through this now, but this is just not possible in this amount of time. So if you want to actually work all the way through your issue, I'll put an open invitation to get in touch, and I will work you all the way through if you want to experience it. But when we integrate them together is when we get our inner wisdom. When the insight that you most need, the action that you most need to take, the wisdom that you most need to make that decision, fix that relationship, change that bad habit that you have, comes out. And what's great about that is it's unique to you. It is yours. It's not someone else's 10-step process, not someone else's suggestion for what you should do. It is what you most need to do. And the last thing we have to do to expand our capacity is to embody self-awareness by being and becoming. And I've got these little window clings on your tables. Take one if you want. But the way that I like to think about it is that every day, what is the most creative, compassionate, and courageous me I can be today? How can I show up and make every decision through that lens? And you'd be surprised how much better the outcomes become when you start to use that lens, when you start to show up in that way. What is the most creative, compassionate, and courageous me I can be today? And because embodied self-awareness isn't a skill, it's a state of being, and it only exists in the present, it's something we have to just keep doing. It's not a skill you check off, oh, I've got that now. Now I'm self-aware. No. It's something you have to keep coming back to. You have to keep practicing every day, all the time, to create those neural pathways. And what happens is our being, which is the speed and quality of our embodied self, our capacity, our energy, our brains, our emotions, all the things we just talked about, impacts our doing. It impacts how well we do and what we do. It impacts our performance. It impacts our results. It impacts how we show up in everything we do in the world. And this is what I call neuroperformance. And I've got a fancy definition up there, and I'm happy to share these slides with all of you. But really, neuroperformance is just expanded capacity. It's understanding how your body works so you can gain access to better performance. And it applies to everything. It applies to everyone in every role, everywhere, in every part of your life. Because it impacts everything you do. And the exciting thing is there's tons of technology now available to help you in this space that we never used to have before. I've been wearing nervous system device this entire time to help me stay focused and regulate my nervous system as I'm standing up here presenting and talking. There are technologies like this that can change and impact you in significant ways. So it's an exciting time in terms of neuroscience to be able to apply this technology in our lives and get the benefits. Now I could end there, but I want to take it one step further. Has anybody heard the parable about the babies in the river? Okay, so I first heard this, I heard Glennon Doyle speak about a year ago, and she told this story and this parable about that there's this baby that's drowning in the river. The woman jumps in, saves the baby, pulls the baby out. As soon as she gets the baby out, there's another baby in the river. Jumps in, pulls that baby out. Pretty soon she's called in the whole village, there's another baby, they're all pulling babies out of the river. When one of the villagers starts to walk upstream, or walk away, and they say, "Where are you going?" And the villager says, "I'm going upstream to figure out who's throwing these damn babies in the river and stop them." We have more mental health issues, more challenges, more stress, more burnout, more things in our world than we ever have before. And if we're going to change them, if we're going to change the results that we're getting, we can't just keep pulling people out of the river. We have to go up and figure out how we change our systems and structures. And I think our workplaces are a key part of this. I think we have to figure out how do we change our workplaces to support expanding people's capacity. How do we change how we do our practices, how we work with our people, how we think about what we do and our cultures to align with what gets people to be operating at their best. And not just because it's going to make them live a better life, although that should be reason enough alone, but because the truth is they're going to make better decisions, they're going to perform better, they're going to create tremendously better results if we do so. So I challenge you to take this question with you, to think about, knowing what you now know, how could you change your workplace? How could you make an adjustment to help your people expand their capacity? These are the elements of what I think are a peak performance culture. Again, I'll share these slides with you. The first is purpose-driven and people-focused. We have to be focused on people and humanity. The second is it has to be an engaging experience. We have to have peak-performing people that are using those neuroperformance practices. We have to have head-fostered, high accountability mindsets, heart-centered, respectful environments, and gut-supported, safe and supportive communities. We have to integrate the neuroscience of human neurophysiology in order to create the results that we want in our workplaces. So now, as I wrap up, these are the actions I want you to take. First, I want you to expand your capacity by balancing your body, your nervous system with presence and breath. Just try to be a little bit more present. Use the 2.5 minutes and balance your nervous system periodically. See the difference it makes if you do it right before you come home at the end of the day, right before you get back with your family. Experience neurophysiological growth, that long-term change, that lasting change by getting to the root of your challenge. Don't stop at behaviors, understand what that's rooted in, understand the thoughts, feelings, emotions, and ultimately the neural pathway that's creating that result. Access your unique inner wisdom by aligning your 3 brains to rewire your neural pathways. Look at how your brains being misaligned is impacting your results. And then finally, embody self-awareness by becoming and being the most creative, compassionate, and courageous human you can. Like I said, I gave you guys some window clings. I put these all over my house. Put them on my mirror in the morning and by my desk so that I can remember as I am performing, as I am moving throughout my day, how I can show up in this way, in the highest expression of my brains. And then one challenge I want you to do is when you leave here, you will learn so much more if you can teach this back to one person. So as you're driving home or later today, teach one thing you learned today to someone else. Just one thing, and you'll be 10 times more likely to remember what you learned. So, as I wrap this up, all true knowing is in the doing. So I want you to be thinking about what action will you take to evolve and optimize yourself and your workplace for peak performance. What are you gonna do to experience and be different in this world so that you can create change, not just for yourself, but for everybody that you impact and interact with. Thank you guys very much for participating.